Welcome.
Thank you.
Candice is the author of 11 crime novels and the winner of 3 prestigious Ned Kelly Awards. She's also co-written 7 New York Times bestsellers with James Patterson, the world's best-selling thriller writer. Candice's novels Crimson Lake and Redemption Point were adapted into a major ABC TV series that some of you may have seen called Troppo. Candice is a meticulous researcher, as you know if you've read Redbelly Crossing, and has interviewed a serial killer on death row. Been to prison 3 times, all for work purposes, and while on honeymoon in the US, took a road trip to famous crime scenes looking for clues, as you do on your honeymoon. Please join me in welcoming Candice Fox.
I'm so pleased to be here. Hello, Geelong. Look at your beautiful city. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. That's a really impressive resume that you have, particularly, I'm told, from someone who doesn't touch type.
That's right. I don't touch type. I am like a little T-Rex with my fingers, just the 2 fingers. 21. You've got an old bio there, and it's probably from my own website.
It is, correct.
Yes, I need to update it with my 2 little fingers. This is novel 21. So I've written 21 novels like that. Yeah. But I'm trying to branch out, but I think it may be teaching an old dog new tricks.
I did see on social media that you are doing lessons, daily lessons, is that right?
Yes, I'm up to a staggering 25 words per minute. I'm very proud of myself. But sometimes, reaching that pinky out to hit the enter key, I feel like I'm lifting a kilo. I'm like, because my neurons in my brain won't tell it to go over. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of reading the book and doing the research for this conversation. I read the book as most readers will, from beginning to end, and without knowing that there is a true life inspiration for you writing it, because you don't mention this until the end of Redbelly Crossing. Surprise, yeah.
It's a trap.
Can you tell us what it is that you discuss in some detail? And how it led into the writing of Redbelly Crossing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what happened. So, all right, where do I start? So I had a pretty weird childhood, as you did, being one of 10 kids. It was chaos. My mum had 4 kids and then she adopted 2, so there were 6 of us permanently in the house, and then she fostered 155 kids as I was growing up. Yeah, so she was allowed to have 6 more on top of her usual 6 at any one time. And she was also a prolific animal rescuer, the way that I am. I've done over 800 animal rescues, but I take the animals and I get them where they need to go, whereas Mum would take them and bring them home. She was also a prolific rescuer of things from the council cleanup. So she created this household where anything could happen at any moment, and she, so she's a lifelong weirdo. So she would tell us this story when we were kids, and the story was sort of buried in amongst a whole bunch of stuff that she would say. And I'll tell you the story. So, imagine this, I'm 10 years old, Mum's leaving me at home alone for the first time ever. That's a big deal, because 12 kids, just me, home alone. I was super ready to get into my brothers and sisters' rooms and mess with their stuff. Mum said to me, now remember, if you're home alone, don't answer the door to anyone, because I answered the door when I was 17 years old. A man was standing there. I was home alone. He said that he was an encyclopedia salesman going door to door selling encyclopedias. And I got this feeling all over my whole body, that something wasn't right here. And so I pretended that my dad was home. And lucky I did, because he just sort of bolted off. And I found out later that he was a serial killer. Yeah, I know. But I didn't say wow because she would say stuff like that, you know? And so I just went, yeah. You know, I was ready to get into Adam's room to get into his Lego. My brother had seriously good Lego. And so this story just kind of sunk into the mud of my brain, and it just was in there, and it was waiting to be retrieved. So fast forward, I'm 35 years old. My daughter Violet is 1.5. She's puddling around the house, and she was just wearing a nappy and a top hat, and she's carrying a toy briefcase, and she's doing her business around the house. And I'm an exhausted parent. My husband Tim, equally exhausted. He's sitting on the couch doing a crossword on his phone. And I was watching Violet, and I remarked to him, she looks like a little door-to-door salesman. And as I said it, the memory came up of this story that my mum used to tell. And I said to Tim, I think my mum has a story about a door-to-door salesman that came to her door when she was home alone, and he ended up being a serial killer. And Tim, who knows some things about my mother, he's heard some things about the stuff she said, he looked up from his crossword and he goes, yeah, that'd be right. And he went back to his crossword again. And I said, no, there's something in this. So I called her and I said, I'm having this memory of this story. And she said, yeah, no, two girls were murdered in my neighbourhood. Lynette White, she was home alone. Her husband had just gone off to work. She had an 11-week-old baby in the spare room, you know. Someone's knocked on the door and talked their way in and stabbed her to death. And another girl, Maria Smith, you know, she's home in her apartment. Her husband's just gone off to work. A guy's talked him his way in, you know, asking for a glass of water maybe or a pen and paper, and he's raped and strangled her to death. And I said, you saw the guy? And she's like, yeah, I saw the guy. And I said, well, who was he then? And she said, oh, no, they never caught him. And I said, well, all right, so you gave your account to police though? And she said, no, I never gave my account to police. And I said, what? I said, are you telling me, I'm looking at these cases now, I'm Googling these cases, I've got her on speaker. I said, are you telling me that you could be the key to this 50-year-old serial cold case murders? There's $1 million on both of these women, $1 million each. I said, Mum, for the last 8 years, I've been trying to be the foremost crime writer in the country. Could you possibly have mentioned at any point? I said, I've been a Richard Feidler 4 times. Every time he asks me on, I'm scratching around, what can I talk about? You had a near miss with a serial killer and you're about to solve it because you're probably the key to the whole thing. And she said, well, he's making it sound really dramatic. And I said, well, I'm a novelist, it's part of the job. And so I took her account to the police. And they said, yeah, that sounds like him. You know, there's a few sexual assaults in the area. And he would say things like, oh, I'm an electrician. I'm here to fix the aerial. Or he'd say, I need a pen and paper to leave a note for the neighbour. He would go and raid their letterbox and get their names and then talk his way into the girl. And the feeling was at the time that he's murdered these 2 women. And I sent my inquiry off to Crime Stoppers under my husband's name, Keen, because I didn't want them to go, you know, oh, Candice Fox, she's making stuff up or whatever. And they said, yeah, no, that sounds like him, but does your mum have like a number plate or a name or anything? And I said, no, she doesn't have those. And they said, oh, well, that's it then. And I said, no, that's not it. For I am Candice Fox. And the detective I was speaking to said, congratulations. You say, it sounds like you're saying that in a way like that should mean something to me. And I said, well, you know, it should because I'm a crime fiction author. Like I have some, you know, pull. We could do a podcast. We could do this. We could do that, blah, blah, blah. He was not, you know, spoiler alert, he was not enthusiastic about any of my ideas. And then, you know, long story short, we came all the way to here, to Redbelly Crossing, to me realising that I have one skill, really, and it's fiction writing. And, 2, I like talking to people as well. and telling a
We
story.
hadn't picked that up.
I don't need anyone to be in the room for me to enjoy talking. That's the thing. And so yeah, that's what started it all. Is that one memory? If Violet had not been with the top hat and the briefcase,
wouldn't have triggered the
it
memory.
wouldn't have triggered.
Yep.
We would not be all the way down the road the way we are now.
So, when you're writing fiction, though, you're in charge of the narrative. You can bend the story, and you can bring it to a logical conclusion. But obviously, in real life, the husbands of these two women haven't been able to do that. They haven't had resolution. So, how do you write something that brings in elements of those two women's stories without being seen to be ghoulish or or insensitive?
That was the concern from the beginning. So initially, after this cop had said, "Thank you very much for your assistance, but I don't need it," I said, "Well, step aside, gentlemen, because I will solve this case myself." And I spent about 3 days doing that. Turns out homicide detection is a whole profession that requires decades of skills and experience. And I had no luck with that. I had no luck with the podcast. I had no luck with the true crime friends of mine that I tried to get interested in the case. I was doing a whole bunch of staring at Paul White, who is Lynette's husband, who has done a lot of press, about, trying to get answers for who murdered his wife. I was staring at him on the computer screen and thinking, I really want to write a book about this, but I don't want you to feel exploited. I don't want you to hear an interview with me, because that happened to Stephen King. Stephen King wrote a short story from the perspective of a wife and a daughter of a serial killer, and then he went on Good Morning America and he said, I wrote it based on the Dennis Rader BTK, because BTK had a wife and kid, and I just found that really interesting. And BTK, Dennis Rader, his daughter, was hurt by that. She was traumatised by that. And I thought, if these two guys who have both come home from work and found their wives murdered, Lynette in the same room as the baby, are hurt in any way by my writing, my whole thing from the very first moment of learning about this was like, how can I help? How can I help? And so I just said, stuff it, I'm just going to write to him. And I just wrote to Paul White and I said, listen, I want to talk to you about your wife's murder if you don't mind. Here's my number. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything else. I just said that. And then he's called me. And I was just prepared to be yelled at with that very same word, ghoul, voyeur, what are you going to write, some Dexter-style thing about what's happened to me, And he called and he said, it's Paul White. You sent me a message saying you want to talk to me about my wife's murder. And I just went, blur. I just told him everything. I just started talking and I said, this happened when I was a kid. And I remembered it. And I said, I went to the police and a podcast and this and that. And I'm on the phone and I haven't heard a single thing. And I pulled the phone away from my ear to see, have I accidentally hung up on him? And I had talked for 7.5 minutes straight without him making a single noise. And I said to him, are you still there? And he said, yeah, I'm here. And I said, what do you think? And he said, I think we should have coffee. Yeah. So we did. And at that meeting, I thought, I'm not going to get upset about this because this is not my pain. Even though, from seeing him, this old guy, I'm thinking, this is the guy, that came home and found her. I thought, I'm not going to get upset, but I could feel it. It was right here. And I was just explaining to him, the hardest part was explaining to him, I'm really enjoying being a mother. I'm really enjoying it. I'm out of the trenches. And Violet is hilarious and fun. And Lynette should have had that opportunity, to enjoy your son. And it was taken away. And I'm right here like this. And that's when Paul reached across the table and he put his hand on my hand and he said, Candice, I think you have good intentions. And I went, I do have good intentions. And I just lost it. And he said, I like your idea, you know. And I said, but in fiction, you're going to get the answer. You're going to get the guy. And you know, and there are adjustments that I have to make. And so when I finally met Stephen, I was saying the same thing. There are things that I have to do because it's crime fiction. Yeah, you got to. And I said to them, I'm going to make this the best book that I can, so that regardless of people picking it up because of the true crime aspect, people go, shit, that book was awesome. It's so twisty and wild and unpredictable. I've never read anything like it. So that I can sell it as far as I can and try to... Because what I'm trying to do is a trap. Like, I don't tell you at the beginning. I tell you at the end. And then it's like, I've lured you all here to see. Now, do you know...
We've just destroyed that for all the audience here.
Yeah, oh, well, you know.
You know what's coming.
You know it's coming. But, you know, and then I get them. It's kind of like, I feel like that bit at the end of the novel is kind of wasted, that acknowledgements page, because all I do is I say, thank you very much to this person, thank you very much to that person. And you don't know those people. And I could just go up to those people themselves and say, thank you very much, you know, and use that as like advertising space for this real crime. But it might get that person, you know.
Let's get into Redbelly Crossing that we're here to talk about as well.
Sure.
Can you begin by giving us the premise for Redbelly Crossing, the setup?
Well, so there are these two brothers, Russell and Evan. They are estranged. It has been 5 years since they've spoken. Russell came out and that destroyed his whole marriage. He came out as a gay man at 48. He was married with a daughter. So that's destroyed that whole situation. And he's kind of had a very difficult relationship with his daughter, Bridie, you know, since then. They've kind of been avoiding each other. And he gets assigned to this case of this young writer who's been killed in Redbelly Crossing. He gets there and, oh my God, it's his brother. His brother is also assigned to it. So they haven't spoken since the big blow up, and they've got to somehow work together. Their personalities are very different. Russell has this real kind of front that he puts on to keep people away from him. And essentially, halfway through the novel, you find that it's Russell digging for the truth and Evan has to cover it up, what he's finding. Russell was actually inspired by a possum that I rescued, which I know sounds weird, but you'll see where I'm coming from. I rescued this big brushtail possum. And so brushtails, they bully each other. The territory of a brushtail possum is only 150 square metres, right? So a male brushtail possum will say, this is my territory, and any other males that come into that territory, they'll, you know, beat the crap out of them, and they can fight to the death over territory, right? So this one male had been trying to find his own territory, and he'd just been bullied and bullied and bullied and bullied and bullied from one territory to another, and he was actually starving. He was so badly starving that he walked into an office, came in through the automatic doors, went around reception and in past the cubicles, and he climbed into a bin. And they called wires and I got there. I took him home and I put him in a dog crate, and I looked at him and I said to my possum coordinator, you know, this is him. I took a photo of him and she said, his body condition is so low. They have a score, body condition score, and if you don't meet a certain score, you're euthanized. And I said, can I just have 3 days, you know? And she said, no, I didn't hear it, you know? So for 3 days, I just fed this possum all the bad stuff. Barbecue chicken, hot chips, sweet potato, eggs, slices of ham, everything. I was like, fat. And he was like, oh my God, this is the best. This is the best thing that's ever happened. But I kept opening the dog crate to give him the food, get rid of the waste and everything, and get the puppy pee. He had a puppy pee pad underneath him, scrape that all out. And every time I'd do it, he'd go, rah, like that, with the claws up, and the mouth open and this horrible like moany hiss. And I go, yeah, get out of the way, move it, And 3 days I'm doing this, cleaning him out twice a day, and this big display's happening. And after 3 days I got jack of it and I said, look, just bite me. And I stuck my finger under his nose like this, and he went, ugh, and like tried to bump my finger away, like I don't want to bite you. And I was like, you're a fake, you're a phony. Can you see? And now you know that I know, that you're not going to bite me because I'm giving you the good food. And so can we just be friends? And he was like, yeah, all right, I suppose. And so then when I clean him out, he's like, I'll just move over. Yeah, I'll just move over. And I wanted to write this big, scary male character who had that front, because he was so sweet underneath. And he was wounded, and he was trying, and it just inspired a whole human character,
Yeah. The most interesting thing about that is that there is someone who is a possum coordinator. Is that an official? Is that a job?
It is the possum coordinator.
A possum coordinator.
Yeah, we have coordinators for all. We have coordinators for all different species. Yep. So I've got a duck coordinator and a possum coordinator. Yeah. And not a lot of people know this, but in the cops, and just quietly, I dated a couple of cops back when I was single, and one of them was the crime coordinator of his particular jurisdiction. Yeah. And I was like, the crime coordinator, coordinating the crime. Yeah, but there's one for every species.
I love one of the things that I really like in the novel is the relationship between Russell and his daughter Bridie. Yeah, as you say, they've been estranged. Yeah. She seems to be the one person who is able to see through that mask that he puts up. Yeah. And lo and behold, she is
an animal rescuer. Yeah, she is. Well,
where that came from.
Where it came from. Yeah. Well, my daughter Violet and I have been doing it. So we started when she was 2. And it was just such a good activity for a 2-year-old. It's exciting. We'll jump in the car, let's go. And we had this little routine that we would do for wires. I would you're supposed to call the person before you go to their house. So I'd call them and I'd say, I'm calling about the blue-tongued lizard that's behind the buffet. And yep, all right. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm so sorry. I've got to bring my supervisor. I hope you don't mind because I'm still training. And then I'd get there and we're both wearing the matching caps and I'd go, I'm still training, So this is my supervisor, as I said, she's going to tell me what to do. And the other little gag that we would do is I'd get the animal, whatever it is. I got my hands full. I got the dog crate or whatever. I'd throw the keys at Violet and I'd say, you drive. And they hit her in the chest and she'll go, Mum, that's right. I'm the driver. That's right. Yes, you drove last time. Okay, sorry, I forgot,
So we have Russell as leading the investigation into the murder. We have his brother, Evan, and Evan is a completely different kettle of fish. And is desperately trying to redeem himself for mistakes that he has made in the past. And it seems to be a fairly common trope in crime fiction that you have this compromised character, you have a compromised police. Why is a compromised police officer or investigator so much more interesting than one who has just followed the straight and narrow?
Because everyone loves a fuck up. They do. Evan just can't get it right, but his intentions are good. But everyone has had that kind of feeling, I suppose, where you're right on the edge. Evan is right on the edge and he's trying to get back in. And if he can just get this little win, I just need a win and then I'll have another win. And then, he's down and out. And everyone has had that. He is someone who is living in shame. And I think that anyone who's had a toxic family, as I have, and, a good portion of the audience probably has had, things like shame and self-loathing and you being the family fuck-up, it's kind of familiar territory. And so sometimes you start wondering whether Evan is the way that he is because anything outside of that would be unfamiliar to him. And because he's comfortable being under the father's thumb. You know, it was very uncomfortable for Russell to have to come out and say, you know, and just to blow up his entire life, you know. In my own family, I was the blower-upper. My therapist says there's a whole category, which is what you are. You're the angry daughter. There are books about the angry daughter. And that angry daughter, usually it's when she's just had a kid and she goes, wow, this is what it means to be a parent. So why did you do that when it's so clear that I should do this? You know, has that blow up and has a massive fight with her parents and sort of comes to realise, you know, who she's going to be. And that's what Russell has had to have. He had to have a blow up. He couldn't ease into it, you know, because he just doesn't have that sort of emotional complexity available to him, being raised the way that he was.
Yep. We haven't spoken about the father yet. We'll come to that.
Yeah, he's
I do want to ask you a more serious question, and that is, I interviewed Sarah Bailey recently as well, and asked her the same question.
Yeah.
And that is that, like we live in the country where there is a lot of violence reported in the media. We have an epidemic of domestic violence in this country, and inevitably, when you're writing crime, you're writing about violence and the effects of violence. Yeah. So, what are the moral or ethical considerations you have when you, on top of this already, you know, the true life history of this story as well? What are those considerations when you are writing? Do you have any?
I do. I don't want to glorify murder or murderers. I met a serial killer. Nothing will cure your fascination with serial killers like going and sitting with one for 2 years, which is what I did, and learning who he was as a person. Because I think that in crime fiction, there's a lot of glorification of people who kill, and that drives, you know, those women who sit in the trials and make eyes at the killer from across the room, the ones that write him letters, you know. So I have walked away from that and tried to represent people who are a bit more realistic. You know, Hannibal Lecter is the sort of the classic trope for that genius serial killer, and he's written as someone who has extra things. He is a man who has genius added, and he has evil added. He has almost supernatural abilities to read minds and get out of any, you know, he cannot be physically contained and all this kind of stuff. Whereas, you know, a real life killer, serial killer in particular, the one that I sat with, is someone who's missing something. He doesn't have anything added. He is missing the ability to connect in a human way with other people, because the connection is two ways, and he's just, it's all me. What is your relation to me? What is your relation to me? And that's how he saw these victims, is you must be for me because I want you, and you must be for me, and you must be for me. And he didn't sort of realise that they themselves were connected to a whole bunch of other people. And when I say he didn't realise, yes, I think that he didn't, even when I explained it to him, when I said you deleted this girl out of her entire existence and her existence within the lives of other people, the complexity of what you did ripples out and out and out and out across decades. And you could see that it just wasn't getting in, you know. He was just looking at his own reflection in the glass behind me and doing his hair and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I feel compelled to stop glorifying killers. And I don't want to get too close to talking about how I do that in this novel because I might reveal who the killer is. But I hope that when you read about that person, you say, this is half of a person. This isn't someone with something extra. This is a pathetic person, you know?
My son is a criminal barrister. And one of the first things that he said about when he went into practice was, he said, you've got to forget about this idea about the intelligent criminal, about this, the criminal mastermind.
Oh my God!
Because you're dealing with largely uneducated, very poorly educated, some only to primary level, very, very few to secondary level, virtually none to secondary level. 53% of whom are presenting with mental illness at the time of incarceration of some sort. It's a different world to what is portrayed often in fiction and in series and television.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And when I was talking to Paul and Stephen, they asked me about that because for the last, it's 52 years this year for Paul, and it's 51 years for Stephen. They said to me, you've met a serial killer, what was he like? And would he have been haunted all of these years by what he did? And would he be sorry? And I had to say no, And that was a moral kind of thing for me. Is do I sugarcoat this for these guys? But I just went into it. I went into the relationship with both of those guys saying, I'm not going to bullshit you about anything. I'm not going to try to soften any of this. And if it's too hard, I'm going to rely on you to tell me that it's too hard or it's too painful, whatever it is. Yeah.
I'm going to ask for questions from the audience in a minute. I've got another question or so for Candice, but when we do that, we'll have a roving mic come around, so please wait until you get the microphone before you ask the question. I do want to know, a number of your books have been optioned made for the screen, and I'm interested in what that process has been like for you to actually visually see these characters that you've created on the screen, and whether you had any part in the process or whether you were kind of shunted off to the side. Were you in the writer's room?
Absolutely
how did it work?
Not. No, I didn't want to be in the writer's room either. I was in a writer's room once. They said to me, will you come up with a concept all on your own and go into a writer's room and workshop it? I said, yeah, sure. I was pregnant with Violet, very pregnant with Violet. So I'm in this room, there's 6 of us in there, and we've all got the story. Here it is, we're working it out. We're almost there. We've got the skeleton of it. I got to pee. Every 25 minutes, I've got to pee. So I leave the room, I go and pee, I come back, and it's like, we've decided there's a twin brother. And I'm like, what? A twin brother? What are you talking about? And I'd wrangle all of the ideas back to how I like them. And then it's like, okay, I've got to pee. And then I go back and it was awful. I don't like, I collaborated with James Patterson on 9 different novels, as you know. And one-on-one, there was enough argy-bargy there about these stories. 6 ways, awful. But I had a wonderful experience on Troppo Season 2. I couldn't get to set in Season 1 because it was filmed entirely during COVID and they were locked down and I was locked down. I couldn't go to set. But for Season 2, they invited me to the set and I'm there and I'm like, that's Ted's house and, and this is the marina and all this kind of stuff. And I'm there, the scene's got like 30 people in it because it's an outdoor scene at a festival. And outside the view of the camera, there's like 200 people. And they're all, lined up like this on either side of me. There's all these people. I can't figure out what everybody's doing. There's so many people. And I'm watching a scene and Thomas Jane, the actor, American actor, he has to come in and wrestle an axe off a guy who's threatening someone else with it. And Thomas, they say, action. And Thomas comes striding in and he gets the axe and he goes, Max, don't do it, man, and all this. And he grabs it, and then the director goes, cut. And he turns around and he goes, what did you think? And I went, I thought it was really good. I thought it was really realistic. I liked your energy. It was great. And then the director, who he'd really been talking to, who is directly in line with me, with the headsets, leans around me and he goes, oh, well, I also thought it was good for what it's worth. And 200 people all went whoosh, 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 like this. And I went, oh, my God. And I just waited for the ground to open up because who the hell am I to think he was talking to me? Oh, my God. And then they run the scene again and I can barely watch it. I'm so embarrassed. I'm watching it through my fingers like this. And he rushes in and goes, Max, don't do it, you know. And then they go, cut. And Thomas turns around and he goes, Candice, I got to know. What did you think? And I said, oh, I thought your last take was better, you know. So he kind of rescued me at the end there. But, oh, my God, I nearly died.
Last one from me, and that is, you mentioned that you have written these co-written novels with James Patterson. As a writer myself, I don't understand how that works. And so what's the you must get together at the start, surely, and then nut something out. But then what happens once you start writing? Because it's sort of trading chapter for chapter, or how do you go about it?
It's about 5,000. He likes 5,000 words at a time because that's a good chunk for him to understand like where it's going. And in the beginning, there's lots of because he likes the outlines. There's lots of phone calls, emails, all this kind of thing. Lots of planning. This is who the killer is. This is what happens. At the end, there's this big scene. And then, you know, and that's not how I work at all. And the time we came to loggerheads about it is he gave me the whole outline for a novel called The Inn. He said, this is a pet project of mine. I've been looking for the right person to do it with. I want to do it with you. I said, yeah, all right. So I read it, and there's these 9 characters, and they all live in an inn. And they're all quirky and different. And a drug dealer comes into town, and they got a band together to kind of fight him off. Anyway, I said to Jim, I read your book, the outline, and I like it. But there's this one character in there, I don't know what he's for. It's just this old guy, he's in the inn. He doesn't really function in any way of the story. And Jim said, just leave him in there, it's fine. So I'm writing the novel, I'm trying to fit this old guy in every now and then. He's not really doing anything, he's in the outline. I came to him a second time, I said, listen, this old guy, I can't fit him in, he's fat. It's like it's fat on the novel, we'll just slice it off. There'll be 8 people in the inn. He said, no, it's fine, just leave it. So anyway, I had him viciously stabbed in this one scene. Just really suddenly out of nowhere. He just happened to be there, and so I just like, and then he's on the ground and he's piss and blood everywhere, and he takes like 3 pages to die. You can see how frustrated I was with him, and I'm like, and then gurgling, and I sent it. I sent that patch of writing to Jim, and on day 1 I was like, yeah, we'll see what happens, you know. And then on day 2 I was like, am I in trouble? I heard nothing. On day 3 I'm like, I'm sweating bullets, I'm fired, you know. And he calls me on day 4 and he said, well, this is awkward because the old guy in the manuscript, he's a friend of mine that I had said, I'm going to put you in my next book and you're really going to like your place. And so now what do I do? Because I don't want to, you know, it's a really good death. I sure didn't see it coming because it wasn't on the outline. And I said, you should take the guy to lunch and just talk it through with him.
Yeah,
it's, you know, late afternoon lunch, you'll agree to anything. So.
We are running out of time.
Yes,
so
sorry.
I would like to, any questions from the audience? We've got one down here, down the front. Please wait until we get the microphones to you so the whole audience can hear.
Thanks so much, Candice. Fantastic book. Absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
I was just interested, has anyone come forward since you published the book with any information about the original crime?
Yes, there has been a bunch. And people dropping accounts of the same sort of thing of, you know, someone said to me in 1981, a guy came to my door and, you know, I didn't let him in, and there was a call out in the paper the next week to say that someone had been sexually assaulted, and I looked at the composite and it was him and all this. So a lot of accounts from women. And then a person related to the investigation. I'm being vague because I don't want to drop anyone in hot water for talking to me when they shouldn't. A person related to the investigation in its initial days has made contact, told me a bunch of things. And then someone who worked with a person who committed a different murder contacted me and said, I think, I work with this guy and I think he might be involved. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening. I get a strange amount of contact anyway. I probably get 3 or 4 murder tips a year anyway. And the letters that I get, emails and messages, they always start the same way. And they always say, I heard you on radio and you sound very approachable, genuine, real. I think what they're trying to say is you sound like a Western Sydney bogan and maybe you're not going to judge me for what I'm about to tell you. And then they say, whatever it is. Oh, I just did 21 years for murdering my wife and I didn't really do it. Or they say, some guy said, the police reckon I chopped my girlfriend up with a chainsaw and buried her under the M5. But I didn't really do it. I'll tell you what really happened. So I seem to accumulate contact anyway. But what's wonderful is that people are bringing me stuff, and I'm not necessarily saying tell me, but they are, and so I'm just sending it over to the police when I get it.
Yeah. Do we have another question? Yes, over here, in the middle.
Candice, just about your characters, when I read Hades, Eden and Fall, I just loved how dark and edgy your characters were. When you collaborate, they're probably not quite the same characters, so you may have partially answered the question before, but are you only allowed to write, when you write with James Patterson, are you only allowed to make the characters as dark or as edgy as he wants them to be, or do you have any say in how they appear?
Strictly off the record. Turn the recording off and everybody lean in. No, there's no sort of allowed or not allowed. It's just that James grew up in advertising and he has a very specific knowledge of what his readers like and don't like. And the edginess of my and roughness of my own characters, I think, I'm here in Australia interacting with my Australian readers all the time. I'm face to face with them all the time, and that's how I know what my readers like. So when I'm writing with him, I'm writing James Patterson novels, and he's over there in the US interacting with him face to face. And he's sort of thinking to himself, these people don't like swearing, tattoos, piercings, rough sex. He has a kind of a do and don't list, So, yeah. And it also might be a bit of a reaction to the fact that when I'm writing with him, it's a collaborative effort. But when I'm writing by myself, I'm sort of saying, well, I know someone who's like this and I know someone who did that, and I'm drawing on actual edgier people. So it could be that maybe. Yes.
Anyone else for... Yes, over here in the side.
I'll answer any questions that you have at the signing table too. It's one question per book that you buy. So go to town. I welcome you to.
How did you start your collaboration with James Patterson?
I met him at a party and I just went over there, which was not the done thing, I was told. It was a big talking point afterwards that I just went over there because I was in this group of people, publishing people, was standing all around me, and he's in a big party, big cocktail party, and he's walked in with his entourage of handlers. And I think the feeling is that you don't want him to get mobbed. So his interaction with everyone in the room was sort of carefully managed, and there were introductions that were supposed to happen. And I was standing with my people and I said, there he is. It's James Patterson. He's here. I'm going to go and speak to him. And they said, no, you can't just go over there. And I was like, no, he's not going to be here all night. He's not going to be part of the last table, all drunk and everything. He'll be here for like 20 minutes and then he's going to go. I'm going to go over and say hi. And so I went over there and pushed some people out of the way. Excuse me, sorry, excuse me. And I just went, there you go, James Patterson, tap, 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 you know. And I had a really good chat with him. I said to him, you know, I was reading, because I really was reading his stuff very early. My dad, I don't know if I said this or not, he worked in prisons, so he had all his law enforcement magazines, and my mum had all the true crime novels, and I got stuck into them, you know, and I went to school at age 8 or 9, I think it was, and one of my friends said, well, I'm reading the Chronicles of Narnia. And I was like, well, guess what I'm reading? I'm reading this book about, you know, kids who kill. And these kids killed their parents. And I told them it was a true story. And they all cried. And I got in trouble. And Mum said, you can't read any law enforcement magazines. You can't read the true crime. And that left me with the James Patterson. So at the party, I said, oh my God, James Patterson, I've been reading your stuff since I was a little kid. I read Kiss the Girls, I was 12 years old. It absolutely changed my life. And he said, wow, that's really inappropriate. What were you doing reading Kiss the Girls at 12 years old? And I was like, mate, we don't have time to talk about how that happened. But, you know, and then so I think my publisher was watching and she was like, oh, they get on, you know, they get on all right. And I think he fancies himself as a bit of a, like rags to riches, like originally a scrapper and someone who's done so super well, you know. I called him one time and he said, you sound puffed. What have you been doing? And I said, I was just out mowing the lawn. And he said, I remember mowing the lawn. You know, so he's been there. He's been there. He's done that, you know.
Candice, thank you so much for such an entertaining and interesting conversation tonight. Can we please thank Candice Fox?
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for a wonderful interview. Brilliant.
We also have Julie from Dimmicks up the back here. She has copies of Redbelly Crossing and Candice's other work as well, so you can purchase from there. Candice will be signing over at the signing table here. I'm sure she'd be happy to sign as many books as you're prepared to buy. Also remember that if you can get copies of Redbelly Crossing from the library as well, so we are in a library. And thank you for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks very much.
Thank you.